Hey everyone, welcome to the VO Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Ann Ganguzza, and today I am way excited. There's good English right there, Toby. Way excited to talk to Mr. Toby Ricketts, I've been waiting to interview you for so long, Toby. Oh. And I think, how many years has it been? I think it's since 2018 when I first...
Yeah.
I first saw you up there on the stage, and I was just so duly impressed with...
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah,
8 years ago. It's been 8 years. Crazy.
God, it's been a long time. Yeah. Well, bosses, for those of you who are not familiar with Toby, he is a world-class, multi-award-winning voiceover artist, as I just alluded to, specializing in British, Australian, New Zealand, American, and global, international, non-regional, or mid-Atlantic voiceovers. And I love this. This is part of your bio. 24-hour service with a satisfaction guarantee. There you go. So, there's a little bit of salesman right in there. So,
exactly. Yeah.
Now, when I first met Toby, he was winning every award at the One Voice in London, and I remember hearing the spots. And one thing, and I could go on, but I want you to go and just look him up and look at his bio. He voices for people around the globe. But I have to gush a little bit and say that when I first met you, you were winning all the awards at the One Voice. And I was listening to the spots, and I was just so impressed at the acting. And I thought to myself that, it really comes down to acting. I mean, and how many times do we say it? I mean, we are called voice actors. And I really was just so impressed with the voice acting that I was hearing that I thought it would be so wonderful one day to interview you. And then how exciting that I actually got to talk to you in depth at VO Atlanta not so long ago. And not only did we have a great conversation about voice acting, but we also had a great conversation about branding.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so we were branding ourselves at the conference there with our outfits, Toby.
That's right. Weren't we just? I mean, Atlanta was so much fun because the chance to dress up and meet these people who you've seen online and you occasionally meet, and you're all doing the same thing. You're usually in these padded little rooms and doing your own thing, and you see each other.
We have our yoga pants on.
Exactly. So you can't see what I've got on now.
That's right. So I'm dressed from the waist up as usual. But absolutely. So welcome to the show, Toby. I'm just super excited to finally be able to sit you down for a few minutes and really have the bosses hear your wisdom.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, and I'm so looking forward to our conversation as well because hopefully it's just an extension of what we didn't even have time to discuss in Atlanta.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that honestly, I'd like to really kind of tap off the acting that we talk about, that we really started in VO Atlanta, that we talked about, and really talk to me about being a global voice actor. How has acting helped you in your career and helped you really become a global source for voiceover for so many clients?
Wow, thank you so much. It is interesting being a voiceover, which up until about 2015. I would say you had to be located in a major city around the globe. If you wanted to act in LA, if you wanted to act in New York, you had to be in those places. But as we know, in the last decade, the industry has changed hugely. And I kind of got into it just at the right time when voice acting was making the transition from being in studio and with an agent with a beeper on your your hip and having to go into a studio through to this kind of online voiceover model where you had the pay-to-plays popping up and you had agents that sort of had some flexibility. Source Connect was well established, IPDTL and some of the other providers were popping up and providing these services. So suddenly the door was ajar to people who, like myself, live in the middle of nowhere. In 2013, I quit my job as a sound engineer, a studio engineer. I'd worked for years and for decades in radio stations, making ads and actually sort of watching people voice. For
I was
such a long time.
Were you voicing them as well, or you were pretty much producing them?
A little bit. I started off just producing them, and then occasionally the deadlines would be looming, and I'd be like, I just need to get this done. There's no voices around. I'll just do it myself. And so I kind of learnt trial by fire by producing myself, and found out I loved being behind the mic. I absolutely loved it, and I loved the auditioning process, the online voiceover casting sites. Really getting real scripts and then getting selected for them was such a rush. So I thought, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to move somewhere where the cost of living is very low. So in the middle of the country, and then I'll have less pressure to deliver on this thing. I'll only have to get a couple of jobs a week maybe to make rent, and then that'll be all good. And so I moved to the country and found out I loved it. My wife and I just love living in the country, growing our own food. We're kind of preppers a little bit. We joke about the zombie apocalypse, but we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. Now that might be seen as quite a bar to keeping your finger on the pulse and being in one of those major centers and missing out on opportunities. But it's kind of a strength, because I feel like when you are removed from that, you can view it from the outside. You kind of have this portal into what that world is through online research, and I feel like you have to work harder because you are from that outside. And today, no one really knows where you are when you audition for jobs. I get work in all my accents in all different markets around the world. The only time they ask where are you is when you're trying to do live directed sessions, and it's never a problem because there's always New Zealanders in this time zone where it's it's kind of like my morning is sort of late afternoon in the States, and my evening is morning in the UK, so I can do most of those markets effectively.
Even I asked you when we got on the line, hey, wait, what time is it where you are? What?
Exactly.
Where are you, Toby?
Yeah,
where are you?
And I like being in the future because it's the 8th of it's the 8th of me, and it's the 7th for you. So I often get asked what the results of the lottery are and which sports team won, which I'm unable to tell them. But being so remote, I think, is kind of a superpower in that it does let you tap in more to what's going on overseas, and you sort of have that natural inclination to try harder and be closer. And when I go to things like Atlanta, it's such a treat because I'm suddenly surrounded by all these people that I know and love and have worked with before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, goodness. And so you are still in your remote area. And now when you moved there, you must have had to build a studio, at that time, right? And so were clients agreeable to allowing you basically, doing work in your home studio? It wasn't like you were required anymore to go into the big city and go into a studio. So you had, and I don't know if Source Connect, what year was this? Was Source Connect around at that time?
It was.
IPDTL?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So I could connect quite easily with studios, and I really only had to travel, I think, twice in my whole voiceover career since I've moved to the country. One was for a documentary where you actually have to read the picture, and another one was where I was actually doing ADR, sort of dialogue replacement in a film to replace a character, which is, again, very sort of techie, critical thing to do, although I could probably do it now with the tools available. But yeah, it's I'm on my third studio now. Studio building is one of my passions. I love it so much. I'm always planning the next studio once I've done a studio. The current one I'm in is built of hempcrete, which is a kind of it's a very old but a very new material. My house is built of hempcrete, hence I had all this stuff left over to build a studio. It's in a converted old garage on our property, and it's got the walls are sort of about 3/4 of a foot thick, and the texture of it absorbs sound beautifully. So in this large room, I clap and it's just the whole room is silent, and it's such a pleasure to be able to work in a booth which is huge. It's like I can really spin around. I think it's about probably 15 feet by sort of 10 feet
compared to here on my walls. And my studio is much bigger than it used to be.
Exactly. Yeah, because I've always noticed, having worked in many studios over the years, the smaller the studio, the more there is that boxy sound and that boxy feeling of not really being able to act, especially into we're talking about acting.
Sure, absolutely.
Physicality is such a huge part of it.
Absolutely. And if I had to do anything, animation-wise, or any sort of efforts, or really move around, I might be a little restricted here.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
and with this new studio as well, the ability to have a standing desk, so that if I need to, I can voice standing up or sitting down. I usually prefer sitting down, but standing up definitely. If you're doing something with it, which is you're having to run and climb
Sure.
ropes and do all those exertions, then you definitely want to be able to sort of stand up and free your diaphragm for that kind of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what type of work do you typically do?
My kind of core work, the work I really chase, is like high-end TV commercial work, usually national level spots, that kind of thing. And also sort of like those anthemic, poetic kind of videos that major corporates are after these days. And like I really love... I get so wrapped up in the visuals, and like I talk to my students as well about how like when you get sent a script, you should be reading the script and imagining the video that goes behind it. Like, and your voice should complement that. And the more familiar you can become with that, with the material, with the kind of the trope of advertising, the ideas that are around in the current moment, the more accurate that picture is going to be, and the more suitable your voice will be to that picture. So I just love that feeling of when you win a job, you get booked, and then you get to see the visuals that your voice is going to go over, and you're just like, I know this is going to be such a beautiful piece of work by the time we're finished with it. And that inspiration, like while you have those, really fires you to give your best performance. And I'm sure you've had experiences where you do a read and it's maybe like the fourth or fifth read on the day, and everyone's just silent afterwards, and you've got the tingles, and everyone's just like, that's the one, that's it. And everything's
it's
it's spooky. It's got this magical feeling. It is. It really is.
It's a feeling when you're like, oh yeah, that was it. That was it.
Yep.
And that's so interesting, because a lot of times I know that my students are trying to listen to what they sound like. And they're not necessarily, I think that takes away from obviously the acting. First of all, because your brain is spending time listening to what it sounds like, and you don't have time to actually be within that story.
Totally. And it is about being. It is about being in that moment. And I feel like I'm a very much a vibes guy. I had a number of conversations at Atlanta about this kind of idea where I've come to where, like for me, I'm very intuitive. I don't, when I learn an accent, I don't learn like which vowels to do this noise on, which vowels. It's all about just be that person. Just feel how they feel. And like I feel like the vibes will eclipse any kind of performance thing, like, and it helps you get into that mood. So to go back to like when you feel that magical feeling of like doing the perfect take, I try and reverse engineer that back into my auditions. So when I'm doing auditions, I really get into that in the moment. Imagine the pictures, imagine my voice over it, and them absolutely working together, and then getting those vibes. As soon as you get those tingles when you do an audition, you're like, I'm probably going to book that because that felt so good.
So do you start with the vision? And the other question is, because a lot of times you don't get a storyboard, or you're not getting any video, and so it really is up to you, the voice actor, to create those scenes in which the words in front of you will make sense, right? And it doesn't necessarily matter if it's what it turns out to be in the end. It's just the fact that you're connected to that story. And I think, Toby, let's talk for a minute about scenes, because I find doing long format narration and corporate work, that sort of thing, when you have a longer format storyline, that people tend to start off with a scene and then they forget about it. Like, 3 sentences in, they've forgotten what the scene is, or they haven't thought about how does that scene change, right? Because if you are really looking at that commercial, or you are watching that video, scenes change in an instant in order to convey that message and to help tell that story. And I find that a lot of times students forget about that, and they kind of go into this like monologue sort of melody that everyone hears in their head. And I know there's a scientific term for it. Like if we read aloud, there's a certain melody in which we read, which I can predict pretty much. Here's where I think you're going to be. If you're not thinking about your scene, this is what you're trying to make it sound like, because we've heard it over and over and over again, right?
Totally. Yeah. So there is, like, I have a theory about this in terms of like the reason that we as voice teachers say practice is because the art of voiceover, I think, is like, first, you're a kid, you learn to read, and everything sounds like this and deliberate. And then when you get better at that, you keep progressing, and you push all of the reading stuff goes subconscious. And you're not consciously reading every word anymore. You're just reading sentences, and you're going back there. And then usually people kind of stop at the sentence level And when they're reading
Yes.
aloud, they have this sound of still kind of reading, but really just the words are just happening and they're not really thinking about it. As voice actors, we need to go further. We need to get so
Yes.
used to reading stuff that we're reading sentences in our sleep. We're really not thinking about it at all, so that we can dedicate our horsepower of our brain into like what's the feeling behind this?
Sure.
What are the choices I'm making about the music in this? Because it's the choices we make as actors which give us compelling performances, and
Yeah.
this is where we are going to where AI can't beat humans in a
Sure.
way, is because it's the unexpected choices, but still appropriate choices that we make
Absolutely.
during things.
Absolutely.
Which AI is going to be the mean. It's the median. It's the summary. It's like
The
of all this
expected.
ingested material. It's the average of all of that. People don't get inspired by really average work.
Yeah.
They get inspired by being surprised and being delighted by things they weren't expecting. And I still think that is our superpower as voice actors, is once we've pushed all the reading to the background,
That's
and
wonderful.
once we're so familiar with the advertising genres that we're interested in, that we can still surprise people and take pauses and maybe give them music they weren't expecting, so that people prick up their ears and think,
Sure.
oh, that's a bit interesting.
And
That's
I
my
love,
goal.
I love how you're talking about the music of it, which I think ties right into the point of view, the emotion behind it, because that to me, right, the music, the music that's not the expected melody, right, but the music of the scene and the emotion of the words, and the interesting part about how your emotion can evolve throughout a sentence. It doesn't have to be the same point of view throughout the entire script, because in telling a story, we don't have the same emotion typically. When we're telling a story, we can be like, oh my God, we're surprised, and then we're like, we're very resolute, and then maybe I don't know, maybe we could be a little unsure, and that can just go from like one portion of the sentence into evolving into the end of the sentence. So you can start off happy, and then you can end up being confused. And I
Exactly.
think a lot of times that becomes the unexpected melody.
Yeah, and one of my favorite kind of music in reads, which I don't hear that much, is curiosity. Like, what's a curious read? And the reason that I find curious reads so compelling is because that you feel like the narrator is finding out the same thing as you.
Yes.
And so you're both on this journey together of discovery.
Discovery, yes.
Especially in corporate narration, because it is so kind of like, but if you have these interesting hooks at the end of your sentences, and it's like you're discovering something new. Like it has a really nice music to it that feels
Absolutely.
different from making declarative statements every time and ending your sentence down, So there are so many different ways to read scripts. And people get really in a corner sometimes with patterning. You're familiar with patterning, always the flight attendants is always the classic example of always ending down. Really predictable music because they've said it 1,000 times, the same script.
Exactly. I find that a lot of students, when they're first starting, will a lot of times end up because they're listening to commercials that may or may not be telling the story, and that finishing up in the sentence or a little bit of upspeak. Sometimes it's upspeak, sometimes it's just like, and then we're going to end up, and I'm like, so I'll be like, no, you're more authoritative than that. So I want you to end down. But in reality, there's a very distinct difference, right? Because I can conclude something and say, this is the conclusion. Right. And I've gone down. But then I can also say, this is the conclusion. I actually went up. And right. So I went, but it was only a tiny bit. It's like if melodically it's a C to a C sharp. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nuance.
Between the two of them, it's a nuance. It's a nuance.
Exactly.
And so when I tell people don't go up, what I mean is don't go, this is a conclusion, because then it sounds, false. It sounds
It's
fake
over the top.
and
Yeah,
not
exactly.
genuine. It's over the top.
And that's
So.
the thing about being, sounding fake and sounding contrived is the reason that we have to practice so much as voiceovers. If it sounds like you're doing something, like it's like a great actor. If it looks like they're acting, then they're not acting. Then it's distracting.
Absolutely.
But if they're becoming the character and they're not even trying, because their subconscious has done this so many times, they know how to do it.
Yeah,
First, like I feel like there's this progression with voice acting, with just like you're a good reader, and then you push you push the reading into your subconscious, and then you concentrate on music. music, and then you push all the music into your subconscious, and then you can get into the really interesting world of nuance and choices and making really distinct little differences. And possibly sometimes, like, the most exciting stuff happens when the emotional context is maybe slightly different from the subtext.
Sure,
There's this whole
absolutely.
interplay between context and subtext with acting, where if they play against each other, it's like salt and sugar. It's like they go together beautifully.
Well, yeah, sweet and salty. I mean, that's like the thing. And I think absolutely. I think that there is subtext is everything, really, when you think about it, in terms of the icing on the cake, when you're really putting that point of view. And
Yeah,
that subtext underneath the sentence can be all sorts of fun, surprising things that can take the listener on a journey with you while you're voicing something.
Exactly. And if people want like a kind of an example of this, like if you imagine like a nice like shot of like a golden hour and it's a family picnic and everything's happy and it's got nice music, and then the music changes to a kind of serious, ominous thing. The visuals are still telling us everything's good, but the music, the emotional subtext has changed, and we're like, what's going to happen? You lean into stuff like that because, I mean, you can't do it on every script, obviously, but like I especially like the curious one because it's kind of neutral in terms of its like whether it's positive or negative curiosity, but it does make you lean in and kind of, it's that whole thing we talk about of leaning forward in the read, of keeping that emotional pace going so that so it doesn't feel like we're kind of dragging our feet and going through the motions. Yeah.
So, Toby, I'm sure you've gotten a script that is maybe a longer format corporate that is maybe talking about corporate responsibility. It's something pretty dry, something what most people think is, oh, God, corporate is just so boring. How is it that you, as a voice actor, turn that into a story? How do you make that challenging for yourself? And how do you make that story interesting for the listener?
It's difficult when you start like trying to pull apart something you do subconsciously, isn't it? But I think the journey into it has to be of that curiosity. Is that there is this company out there, and they have like, if you really think about, how these things come about. That company started somewhere. It's had lots of people through it. There's a CEO. They've all got their own stories. They're working towards this one goal. If you can try and intuit some of that passion maybe, or the interest in their project, they're all doing this for a reason, and it's usually not money. Like people are driven by the thing they want to do, and to try and like go to the corporation's like About Us page, see why they're doing what they're doing, and see if a bit of that can rub off on you, because then you'll genuinely tell their story from their perspective. And the whole thing about corporate is embodying the brand, is you are the voice of this company. So you need to have pride. You need to have the passion that started this company, and like really let those things alter your voice rather than just being the spokesperson. Like, I've got nothing to do with this company. I'm just reading the script they gave me. That's the wrong direction. You have to you have to use your voice to emotionally connect with the people who are watching this, so that they are on the same page as the founders, because that's what we're paid to do as voice actors, is really become those things.
And I think also let's talk for a bit about who you're talking to. I think that is like so important, right? And what is it that you are doing for the person, or what can that product do for the person? What can your delivery of information about this product? What can it do for the person? Because I think time is very precious, right? People that listen to commercials, or if you want someone to listen to you, you have to have a message that is geared, I think, not necessarily towards how pretty your voice sounds or how beautiful you voice it, but about how this product or this service can help. Right, can help the person that's listening, right? And it's because it's about them. I mean, think about it. Like when I'm watching television at night, I talk about this. I'm scrolling, and I'm scrolling on my phone, and I'm also watching television. So what is commanding my attention at the time, right? I either need to be entertained or I need to be educated, right? Entertained or educated. And whatever is winning, right, is doing that for me. It's not necessarily, I'm not watching the TV show, to make the producer feel good. That, I've watched your show. No, I'm watching it because I have a goal to be educated or entertained, or I need to have a problem solved. And I think that if you are asking someone to listen to your voiceover, right, then you have to have a full understanding of what it is that product can do to help the person. And then when you think of it in those terms, it then becomes a story about how you can help. And it becomes that emotional connection, right? And not about like, oh, I've got this great sounding voice and it's cheap. This product is cheap and you can get it for cheap. But in reality, it's not necessarily about the factual things. It's about the emotional tie that the listener can say, oh my God, I have to have that. Like I say this, I have to have this red color because it goes, right? It goes with my, right? I have to have it. I have an emotional attachment to it, right? I don't care how they said it to me. I just know that I have an emotional connection to it. So how can your voice bring that emotional connection?
Emotional connection, I mean, you need to feel it yourself. That's the key thing about acting. It's like if you're not feeling it, then how's your audience going to feel it? You know, it's got to be the most emotional voiceovers I can think of, the ones that really move me, the ones in movies when you watch like Disney films and stuff and you hear the great voice acting that really moves you is when you hear the cracks appear and like the involuntary stuff that happens because the actor is actually feeling that and it's actually affecting the way they speak. And we can recognize that between us. We can realize when it's put on. Absolutely, like we are so attuned to people faking it. And, so when we see someone actually being emotional and breaking down, like when you see just a great scene by a great actor in a movie and you can feel it in your core because they're feeling it at their core and they're letting it flow out of them, So that's the point we want to get to. And it's hard when you're presented with a corporate script that's like, we here at Ricketts Corp believe in corporate responsibility.
Corporate responsibility to our investors, to our, to our clients.
And you're like, So this is my thing about audience as well is that, we've got the classic example of, is it B2C or is it B2B?
Yeah.
Is it to consumers? Are we talking to the masses? Which is a very tricky ask because we really don't know who we're talking to. It could be anyone. B2C is a bit easier because I pretty much just imagine a boardroom.
That would be commercial, I think.
Yeah,
mostly commercial, right?
Yeah, corporate stuff is
corporate
B2B.
Stuff, I say B2B, yes, and commercial is B2C.
Exactly. Yeah. That's pretty much the difference. Not always, but sometimes.
Not always, but for the most part.
Exactly. And this is that whole Venn diagram of like where does commercial end and corporate begin and where does explainer fit into that and like all those things. The answer is it's complicated and there's fuzzy areas and they can be both at the same time. But going back to audience, there's this tricky decision we have to make. Are we talking to the end consumer and or we're talking to a business? Which is usually, like I imagine, a boardroom. It's a lot more kind of assured and you're making more declarative statements. You want to be the safe choice. You do want to move them a bit, but not like business is not an emotional domain. It's something where it's usually, it can be, but it's usually more kind of like trust and certainty.
I like that. But let me just interject and let me just say, having worked in the corporate world, right? There's a lot of corporate people, and you think about a lot of corporate people that get into voiceover because they hate their job, right? Why? They feel unappreciated. They don't feel love. They don't feel love. I'm telling you. Like, of course they want to get paid, but they don't feel like they're appreciated. And a lot of times they just want to be recognized. They work so hard for this company and nobody recognizes that. And so I always feel like they just want love like the rest of us. And so that's how I always try to associate that emotional connection because if you are speaking on behalf of a company, as you mentioned, right, the company started somewhere. It started with a person who wanted to create a product that would help somebody, and that came from a good place. And then ultimately that product, if it's B2B, right, can help another company to help their clients. And so the person that you might be selling this to, because corporate is always a sale, right? It's a company. That's why you have companies. Then when you're selling to another company, you want them to be able to win. And make a profit, look good to their bosses, make their clients happy. So it can be turned into an emotional aspect to it. It's just a little, you've got to think deeply into it. Otherwise it just becomes about the product.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And then there's this whole other angle, which I've wondered about as well, is that if you're in a live directed session, which happens quite a lot, and I definitely advocate for live directed sessions because I love that interplay. Some of the best stuff happens, and you get to meet the clients and the agents and everything. Is the audience the director? Because it's their job to know the audience better than you can. And they've spent a lot more time on this than you. And they've got the visuals in their head. They know what the final product's going to be. So maybe listening to them, that is an audience of one, which is easier to rationalize in your brain.
Absolutely.
So I think that those are the, again, like acting, voice acting, it's all about the decisions we make.
And if that person, by the way, changes, right? If it's the person who's directing you, right? They're the audience, right? Then if you've been live directed with multiple people from the company and then they start to disagree.
Oh, my goodness,
right?
yes.
Because
especially the agency and the clients.
Right.
Oh, those are the interesting
Because
conversations.
one person feels that it should be one way and the other person feels that it should be the other way. And I'm always telling people, look, I'll give examples of here's a corporate, video, and they'll go to the corporate video and they'll say, but that sounds like what I hear in the way I read it. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's good. Just because it just depends on who directed you that day, right?
Yeah,
it depends
exactly.
on what they hear because it's their audience is what they accept as being, yes, this is what I'm looking for. And ultimately, the best thing you can do is when you audition, and the best thing that I say that I'm doing when we're coaching is I'm coaching you to get the gig. Once you get the gig, if you're the actor, they're going to know it. You can give them that pretty read if you want. You can do that with your eyes closed. You don't need to hire me for that. Like, you know what I mean? We're working towards acting and telling the story. And so if you can do that, any casting director that, is worth his salt will know, right? His or her salt will know, I'm working with an actor, so this is great because I can get all different styles of reads.
Yeah, exactly. This is why, like, the art of the audition is like, and it's like bread
Right?
making. You know, everyone's got their own recipe that
art.
they like. But I think things to consider are the whole having two passes in one audition, and you say like one of two of two, and making sure that they are vastly different.
Yes.
And the techniques you use to get to that vast difference. One of the techniques I quite like is that when you receive a script, that you don't look at the specs, you don't look at the story, you just look at the words and you think, how would I voice this? I think I know what the pictures are, make some decisions, and then give your kind of gut instinct read. Then go back, read the specs and say, did my read comply with that? And if they did, then great, give them something else as well, because give them a wild card. And if it's totally different, then give them a safe read, but put that second.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
half of the audition stuff is getting noticed.
I love
and
that.
You'll only get
Noticed.
5 seconds. From a casting
noticed.
director to get noticed. So make that first 5 seconds the most important thing and surprise them, and then they'll probably keep listening.
And Toby, doesn't that first 5 seconds have a lot to do with that melody that we've been talking about?
100%,
right?
exactly. Surprise them in that first 5 seconds, and they'll be like, oh, that's different from 95% of the other auditions I've listened to today, because you don't want to be one of a crowd. You want to be the one standing out at the edge and them going, wow, this guy's got range and he takes risks. So I'm a big advocate for taking more risks in auditions, because so often it'll get into the session and they'll actually bring you back to the center. But at least you got the gig,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think also, Toby, let's talk for a moment about the moment before, because I'm a big believer in the moment before, because I feel like it enters you into the first word with purpose.
Right, exactly. Like putting words before the words that you've been given.
Yeah. And I think everybody, if you had a word in front of you, it's kind of like once upon a time, and melodically, right? Everybody will start with that, today, once upon a time, just a few of his impressive clients, and I'm just taking a look at, what I'm reading on the screen here, but I start on that same note. Right. And I think everybody that's not really thinking about that moment before, that it's kind of like, I'm starting my monologue now. Once upon a time, I started a monologue. And everybody's going to start at that same note. And if you come into it, maybe on a different note, a slightly different note, a nuanced note with a point of view that is, right, that is somewhat surprising or curious. I like that. Or curious.
Or
then
ponderous.
That casting, ponderous. I like that.
Ponderous is one of the best directions I ever got. In fact, the best
Ponderous.
direction I ever got was do less.
Yeah.
Which is one of those things about, like, I can hear you trying, don't try.
Yep.
Do what you're doing, but stop trying.
Yeah.
Because
do
I can
less,
hear the trying.
Yeah.
Do less.
Stop trying.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. Do less.
Yeah.
Stop trying.
Do less. It's such a great
Just
direction
be.
for people who are just like, there's too much of like acting going on, and you just
Yeah.
need to relax into it.
Well, I think it's like, I think you get to, I'm a good reader, right? The stages of a voice actor as you go, right? A good reader, a good articulate reader with a nice voice. And then I go to the B actor. Like right? If you watch it, like how many of us like see a B movie and we know it immediately? Why? We can hear it. And then, versus like, I don't know, seeing a beautiful piece of, cinema or, a movie where like there are amazing actors where you don't even question, like, or immediately. And so
like the spell is not broken, because the spell is broken by hearing someone try.
Yeah,
There's a
They're
joke in There's a joke in I was very much into audio post-production and like doing movie sound. I nearly became like a re-recording mixer, like mixing movies back before I became a voice artist, because I love movies and I love the sound in movies. And there's a saying in that about like, don't use the surround speakers, don't do anything that the audience will notice, because as soon as they notice and they look, they'll see the exit door and they'll realize they're in a theater. And the spell will be broken. So, like, what you see has to be good enough that it matches perfectly what's happening and surprises you a bit, but not that it breaks the spell of actually being at a movie and being completely wrapped up in it. And that's kind of the same for voiceover.
I love
it's
that.
like, you know, if you can hear someone really trying and acting and if you can hear them making the choice, then it sometimes can be distracting from actually just being wrapped up in the read, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. What would you give as advice for people just starting out? What would be a good way for them to hone their acting skills?
Watch movies, imitate. I think imitation, like me as an intuitive artist, in that I don't try and break down what they're doing and then reconstruct it bit by bit. I just try and feel like revoice the lines, like take a scene, react that scene, try and feel what that actor is making you feel, and then get into that same place. Like experiment with getting into that place. Like we were talking just before we started recording.
The sound. Just mimic the feelings.
Yeah.
Like
Try to
mimic the feelings. So feelings versus sound.
Yeah, and try and, like, you know, take something that inspires you and try and inspire yourself with it. Like, you know, really feel that feeling of inspiration for whatever reason, you know, it is. So I think, like, ingesting all of that stuff is really good. We talked just before about you know, people, when you teach them, can get kind of emotional. I found it out. I run the Voice Academy here in New Zealand, which is an in-person weekend-long course. And it really is genuinely a life-changing experience for most people, and they will cry when we give them their certificate, and they will just be like, this has meant more to me than you can imagine. And like, it really, when you start really not breaking down your voice, but getting inside your voice, opening up emotionally and finding those emotional things, you have to go to those places, I think. Because, you know, again, if you don't, then your audience is never going to as well.
Sure.
So, and you need to know where those kind of like limits are within yourself. So be emotional at movies, cry at movies, find stuff that makes you cry, that you find really enthralling, and wonder, like, try and reverse engineer it. Why is that actor so good? Like, what is he doing? Can I get into that same vibe? I think as an intuitive actor, that would be my recommendation, is to try and learn by osmosis. And surround yourself with it. Can you cry at
a corporate narration? There you go. You know, I always
that's our challenge to each other,
right? I always use this as an example, and I'm thankful that I had a corporate background. When I graduated college, I got a job as a design engineer for an orthopedic company, and I designed hip and knee implants. And I was young and starry-eyed, and I loved what I did, and I really was proud. I was so proud to work there. And I was so excited that a design of mine could, like, you know, be a prosthetic that could be put into someone that could help them eliminate pain and walk again. And that to me that's the feeling. Like, it's the overarching feeling that I try to always start with when I start with a corporate read, just because you've got to, you know, typically if you're representing the company's voice, there has to be pride. There has to be a little bit of passion, not overly passionate, not overly dramatic, but you have to be like, oh, this is the best. And I'm so thankful that I had that experience that I can draw off of. And I constantly am asking my students, what are your prior experiences? What is your prior life experiences that you can draw upon so that you can apply that to because most people will say, well, I can't get emotional about a company, you know, corporate responsibility read, or maybe HR policies. And I'm like, well, in reality, you know, think a little bit more about a storyline that can help you get there. For example, if you're talking about, you know, human resource policies, maybe talk about a policy that really was able to help someone, right? Maybe whatever it is that made a positive difference. And then at least get that feeling first. And then that feeling can be that kind of wash over the words, as long as it still makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
It is about trying to feel those emotions and bottle them for later use.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So I noticed when you took a drink, Toby, that your mug had these lovely little chickens on them. And so I'm curious. I'm curious about the chickens, Toby. Can you talk about your chickens?
Absolutely. Well, those who've gone to my site and watched the video on my front page will understand the lifestyle choices I've made, which is kind of preppy and a little bit zombie apocalypse. But I live 4 hours north of Auckland, which is the biggest city in New Zealand. So I'm really in the middle of the New Zealand jungle. And we've surrounded ourselves with lovely animals. So we've got a chicken. We've got a chicken
So you do
coop
have
with,
chickens.
We do. We've got 20
How many
chickens.
chickens do you have? I love that.
We've got 20. Around
Wow.
20. We're never quite
Wow.
sure of the exact number. But and we've also got 3 sheep who keep the
Wow.
lawns mown, which is quite nice. But they keep escaping at the moment. And sometimes there's a paddock outside my studio here. And if a car goes past and they bar during it, I do hear that on my recordings.
Oh, my gosh.
So they sometimes get banished from the studio paddock.
I love it. I love it. And so you have no regrets about moving far away from the city life?
No, not really. I do still enjoy, going to conferences and going to the city, but I have sort of a fuse of about 3 days when I've gone to restaurants and I've socialized and I'm like, I am ready to, this is too many people living together. I cannot do this anymore.
We're going
Exactly.
back.
Go back and join the animals. We're off grid here, so it's all sort of solar power. The studio's mostly
nice.
solar powered.
Nice.
Which is quite nice in sort of power cuts and stuff because I'm not reliant on the power grid. So it's I've really resilience I've given the studio resilience and made it kind of disaster-proof.
That's wonderful.
So that I can still keep working.
Yeah, do you have I feel like there's a studio tour video somewhere that we must watch.
I need to do one, really.
I think you need to do one of those because that's really interesting.
I should do that. That's that'll be on the list for next week for sure. Because it is one of those. It's one of those things though. It's you need to get a studio so tidy before you do a video because otherwise it just looks like an absolute mess. I'm sure you know what I mean.
Oh,
It's
I know.
like
When I first built
away.
my studio, it was all, let's take the pictures quickly before the desk becomes a mess.
Exactly.
And right now, even though it's fairly clean, I've got a lot of things hooked up.
Yeah.
And 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 as a matter of fact, it's so funny because I'm just going to show this to you, Toby, because like if I can do this, my TLM 103, where is it? The shock mount. The shock mount got old. And so literally it's hanging on by like a thread. I can't even pick it because one of them, the rubber bands are, And so I was like going to do a whole video on how to rethread those rubber bands. But then I ended up buying a completely different shock mount because I was like, oh man, I have to look that up. But anyway.
Yeah, I've done that before, rethreading the old shock mount here.
Yep. I did it once. I did it once. Well, Toby, it's been so much fun talking acting with you. I absolutely love this. Thank you so much. How can bosses get in touch with you if they would like to learn more?
I reckon just go to the old website. It's tobyrickettsvoiceover.com. And I'm going to have you on my podcast soon as well because there's plenty more to talk about. So that's called VO Life. It's had a bit of a hiatus over the last year, but we're back and I'm going to talk to loads of interesting people this year about their life stories and what makes them unique in the voiceover world and their secrets.
I love it. I have lots of secrets I'll divulge if you interview me.
I'll get a scoop.
You'll get the scoop. You'll get the scoop. Well, thank you so much. I am going to give a great big shout out to our sponsor, IPDTL. You're familiar with IPDTL. You too can connect and network like bosses. Find out more at IPDTL.com. Bosses, have an amazing week, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.